Good morning, good afternoon, and happy Monday, June 16th, 2025. We are here with part 4 of our Let's Build integrations featuring HubSpot and Shopify. And today we are with Stefan Longcar talking about reports and dashboards. How exciting is that for you, Stefan?
Oh, very exciting for me. For the listeners, not that much, I'm sure.
Oh man, that's a good place to start, right? Uh, well, we're hopeful today that we can kind of close the loop on this series as much as you can. Like it's never done. I think that's a mistake sometimes people make, is thinking that these projects, as the world moves so fast, as more and more data is captured, as human behavior changes, never really done. Um, but we should get to a place where execs can come in, company leaders can come in, they have a place they know they can go to and answer some specific questions about the business. We did all this work to data model and decide what Shopify is doing, what HubSpot's doing. We integrated the systems. Now we have to make it worth a damn for all the people that have been waiting for that. And that comes through reports and dashboards, at least at the leadership level, right? At the lower levels, we're enabling users with the data flow and making sure they have all the data they need to execute on all the things that the leaders are expecting of them. Um, so where do you start in terms of helping? Let's start here. Like, where in the process do you usually define the reporting and dashboards themselves?
So to answer that question, I'll just add one thing into your description of what the reports and dashboards should be looking for those board members, management, decision makers, is that decision making process, and that's where we start on how do we craft reports and dashboards, especially in HubSpot, is that we get a question or we get a question that needs answering. Okay, and then our kind of first thing is to understand the data model, understand the integrations, the data behind it, how the HubSpot's capabilities, and so on. And then we started making reports and dashboards off the back of that. So that's kind of usually the thing is, because let's face it, why do we kind of, to maybe give some context, is we do reports and dashboards for every single customer that we ever worked with. They never just employ us to do workflows or integrations or set up the Shopify like native integration and things like that. They always employ us in an addition with report and dashboard. And any small or big CRM that we are building always has that report and dashboards component, because you can scrap all of that work in automations, in integrations, in setup, in implementation, in training, if there is not a visibility and there is not also democracy, which I'm big on saying that reports and dashboards bring democracy into the system, because it allows you just multiple things to see and for you to make a decision on where to go. So that's I think the crown of everything, and it all starts with what is the question that you want answering? Can HubSpot and the data behind it answer it? If integrated, if set up correctly, of course it can, with its own limitations, which I'm sure that we're going to hit a little bit later in this discussion altogether, the limitation of reports and dashboards in HubSpot. But it's big on that, and I think we're never told how to craft a report. We're never told how to craft a dashboard. We're just there with a question, and we are the one that need answering it. So we internally have our own ways to building reports and dashboards in HubSpot, especially with comments and providing some context, because you have to realize that majority of, let's say, top management, senior management and boards are not in HubSpot day to day, and they maybe don't even know what a discovery deal stage means. So you have to provide that context of what is the sales kind of classifying that as discovery and so on. So in my even education, because my kind of trade, if we can call it that, is data science, there was always like 3 simple rules on how you communicate data, and that's comment, comment, and comment. And I think a lot of we can, again, we'll go into this in limitation with HubSpot, but the disadvantage of every single reporting dashboard tool out there is that it's not built for comments, especially if something is dynamic. You can always include text anywhere and things like that, but it's not pinpointing to, I want to comment on this point exactly in this line chart, right? Or anything of that sort. So we're kind of big on saying that that needs to be done, because when they log into HubSpot with just a quick view of those 10, 15 reports on a dashboard, they need to know where they are, and they need to start thinking about making decisions off the back of the data that it's showing them.
Well said. And that gives me an idea for we'll make time at the end to talk about some AI capabilities. Because what you're alluding to is that experience of like the question and answer experience that we need to be like inside of the reporting process and dashboards. And I know the team's working hard on that. There's a ways to go on making sure that's viable. But I want to run this scenario by you so you can tell me what was missing or what could have been done differently. When I first got introduced to RevOps, really, back in 2020, I had a new boss. Like he had always been the champion of the ERP, right? And so much where he would go to events and talk about how he crafted like these magnificent views that included like 34 different forms. But the way he approached reporting, which is kind of like views in what the ERP is doing, like he wanted to be in a situation where he could create a new view like every other day, right? Like, and even though I didn't really know a lot about RevOps at that point or process, like it didn't make sense to me that you would want like to basically create a fresh like look at the data in the system. First, like why maybe speak to like why people get to that point, but also why that's not a good way to set up the system.
The less you interact with reports and dashboard, the better it's going to be. And I'll give you one example in HubSpot, for example. Quick dashboard filters. When it was released, I think, a year ago, maybe a little bit less than that, it was like, this big thing, and we explored it and we implemented it with a lot of customers. And we're, I think, slowly now realizing that it was a little bit of a mistake, because in reality is, just out of practicality, CEOs, managements, calendars are full. And then you're asking them to interact now with that dashboard and set it up for themselves and compare and so on. Very difficult. So we kind of slowly started scrapping that idea, and we started just providing them with a set date range, and coming back to that old classic way of saying, dashboard this month and dashboard last month, and then the comparison all together. The old fashioned does work. But for me, is the less interactions that they have and the less ability to mess up something that they're not 100% sure of is something that we definitely encourage. So reports should be creating decisions and more work for the team, but not on reports, on other areas of the business. That's at least how I see it. So whether that's a unique or not a unique approach in the industry, I'm not 100% sure, because I know there's always kind of mixed opinions on how reports and dashboards should look. But for me, always in reports and dashboards, the rule is the less is better, right? The less data that we show them, and it's more direct and it's more actionable, that's what we want to kind of get to. And that's a work in progress, because I would say when we're looking at our project management tool and the number of things that we have to revise and kind of go back to and correct and so on, there's always going to be a constant change between waiting on us, waiting on client in our statuses on reports and dashboards. On an automation, we can build it, we test it, it goes live when maybe one or two changes or an additional workflow needs to be built, and that's it. Or on the integration, same thing. But when it comes to reports, it's constantly back and forth, because a lot of eyes need to see it, a lot of eyes need to approve it, they need to understand it. So that's my thing is like the less is better. If you can follow the rules on that when it comes to reports and dashboard, the better it is overall.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is like when a leader generally, or any kind of manager, or even individual, right? Like what we want to avoid is these, man, if you've ever gone into Salesforce and you see these reporting like folder structures, that it's this person's report for this time period, and you can see just everybody is just creating reports on reports on reports on reports, and sometimes like all the variables are different. So literally what they're doing is in the moment, they're like, I want to know about this. Like at this moment, I feel some pain that I need to know about this. And like what I'm hearing is like, if there's no decision to be made, like based on the report, then why, like, you shouldn't be making the report.
No.
Right. So how do you get somebody to move? I mean, and it's kind of like, this is why we start at part one, right? Like, what are the systems supposed to be doing for us? Right. And so many people start at part four where we are now. And if we haven't done all this pre-work to make part four like possible in a way that's, we're not making reports every day, and we can make decisions like based on these reports. And this is where, as an admin, if you're setting this up, you have to stand your ground on this one at some point. And maybe you make the report, but after it's reviewed, it's like, okay, what decision are you going to make now? Like based on this data, what action are we going to take? And so let's say we do that, and let's think about it in the context of HubSpot and Shopify for our conversation today. What kinds of decisions, let's say decisions become possible because we've integrated the systems?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get to the point of like, yes, we should see it here, or no, we should see it? There's so much, like, this is why I hate the source of truth, like, conversation. There's so much effort put into whether or not the data should travel to either place, like, because it's not supposed to be over there. Like, how do you walk people through that part of the conversation?
Yeah. So I think difficult one to answer because reports and dashboards are so unique to each of the businesses. So we have like our own standard from sales activities all the way to carts, and then how do we report on the back of that. But we that's mostly for the customers that don't know where to start, and then we implement that and refine it constantly. So if you take a look at, I don't know, cart dashboard between all our customers, they're all going to be very different in visualization aspect, in the data aspect, in basically everything on that side of things, split between B2C and B2B, and how is that all being tracked. To give you kind of maybe our template, if I can remember it now off the top of my head. So conversion is big, like abandoned checkout to salvage checkout, or however you save checkout, however you want to do it, and then in the end to a transaction, to an order, to a shipped item. In the end, and a successful customer, that's quite important ones. How many abandoned checkouts? What are the products that have the most abandoned checkouts? That, for example, actions the data. Okay, maybe something is wrong with our product page on Shopify. Maybe we need to employ a CRO agency to kind of look at all of that and get anything meaningful out of that. Reports on orders, quite important to have that visibility in HubSpot to see how fast it is moving. Is it any stage that it's stalled? Are we having problem with the stock? Is it there, less stock than it should have been, and that's why that order is held? Are we spending more money because we are shipping that multiple item order in 2 bits because we are again waiting on that one piece of stock to come in? So all of these questions, I think, can be answered nicely with a nice report and a dashboard, looking at some cumulative times in stages and things like that. So that's all 100% possible. But overall, I think the question is always going to come from a problem. They identify the problem in their, whether customer service or whether they in delivery teams or ops teams or marketing teams, or it's not converting, or they're, it's always a classic question. Well, we're putting a lot of money into Facebook and Meta ads and TikTok ads and all the others. Like, why is it not resulting in an order? And then you have to support the data around it and try to find whose fault it is, or what is the blocker in the process in order to do that. And the only way that you can find blockers and missed opportunities and opportunities to grow your revenues from the data. And that's then data visualization. And when it comes to reports and dashboards and looking into it, dive deep into it, and so on. In the context of Shopify, I think it's always a blend, because it's very difficult to move, let's say, an e-commerce team into HubSpot to do some reports. They're always going to stay in Shopify. Shopify reporting and dashboards has the same limitation with their own functionality as HubSpot does, and that's kind of the reality. And that's why there's a lot of marketing tools out there that integrate with Shopify and with other email marketing platforms if somebody is using them, on top of Shopify as well, and so on. So I think e-commerce reporting as a general topic is a very, very difficult topic, because all of these systems, LTV is such a big statistic everybody wants to know of. We all know that email marketing is a cheaper way to get customers than paid media these days. And everybody wants to increase that, LTV, boost it in a way. But you'll find that how maybe Shopify looks at LTV and how other platforms reporting and dashboards look at it, it's completely different, their formula. And it's then the big question, why is it different? It's showing me here, there, and then you really have to, prove it to the board management and get their time to kind of understand it, what is the true one, and so on. So e-commerce reporting and dashboard, a whole beast in its own.
Sounds like it. But you started with the comments related to where the team is working, right? Which I think is often missed, right? Like the data capture is everything. And the data often comes from a combination of, the systems that we put in place, like whatever the customer facing media is, whether it's social or paid ads or the websites itself, the e-commerce store, but also the team, the customer facing team interacting, with that data and with the customers to create more data, right? If we put stuff over in HubSpot and the team is in Shopify, there's a natural disconnect, right? So how do you discuss that part of these projects? Because where you then went is if we have this kind of lack of alignment, right? Systems are built to show things in different ways, and it starts to create a really complex. Is it just take me through how you navigate that challenge.
Well, I can tell you the simple answer and a true answer, but I don't think you're going to like it, because when we have Shopify and HubSpot and an ERP, we then build Power BI dashboards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, I think, we can also touch a little bit on limitations, and we do the same thing as, when HubSpot reports and dashboards just don't meet the need anymore, we kind of tell them to do Power BI. So just recently, we've developed our own custom integration with Power BI. When it comes to HubSpot and Shopify as well, we have, and a couple of other kind of ERPs that Power BI doesn't have a native integrator with. And it's working a charm. You can't believe how much the customers are really happy in order to sell, guys, this is amazing. This is what we've been waiting, for years, basically. That was one of the comments. Because looking at HubSpot reports and dashboards from a data scientist point of view, they're good, but they're too shiny. They're too flashy. They're too colorful. And, looking at the Sankey diagram, that's something you can sell somebody on. But when somebody looks at that Sankey diagram and need to make a decision, it is difficult. It is difficult. And especially usually even outside of e-commerce, when do we introduce Power BI to our HubSpot customers is when we hit the funnel reporting limitation. And one of the first funnel reporting limitation is going to be that it's going to show you the maximum range of last 365 days, period. And they want to see something before, and we say, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't get you the conversion from 2021 for you to compare with 2024 or anything of that sort, which is quite important in data, which is quite important in reporting and dashboards. The only way, you have to do everything scale by time. And that's what I'm big on saying to my team, everything, when you're building a report or a dashboard, think of time, think of comparison. Because if you, classic kind of e-commerce comparison is Black Friday this year with the month before and with the Black Friday last year. Yeah, so that's kind of the months that we always compare all together, and that's very difficult to put in HubSpot, almost impossible. So we have to introduce another tool. Thankfully, Power BI is not very expensive, so and our build of it is quite affordable. So thankfully, the majority of customers are saying yes, kind of go with that, and then we have to introduce another tool. So that's when it comes to what we do internally, and it's showing quite a lot of success. Another thing is that I understand it's difficult, especially in people that have multiple teams using multiple softwares, because I think what HubSpot hasn't thought through here is who is using what. So if somebody's paying Shopify Plus, which is quite an expensive software altogether on a monthly basis, of course it compensates the transaction costs that they are paying to Shopify when it comes to volume. But where are the products going to be listed, for example? One simple question. E-commerce team is listing the products. It's either going to be in Shopify or it's going to be in a product information management system or an ERP, right? So those are the ones that are going to push that product information onto various channels. Okay. So that's, let's say, one thing. If somebody is already in Shopify and they want to then take a look at the report, why would they log into HubSpot? We all talk about tech stack simplification. But is it really simplified, is my question. If the data is not flowing, if the integration is not right, if you can't control things from both systems and putting some, data governance rules in betweens and so on, are we really doing much? Our native integration, coming back to the question that we were putting there in the first part of the series is the native integration good enough? Or is it just a replacement and an add-on of a couple of features? And that's what I'm really kind of frustrated about, because explaining all of this to customers is difficult, because a native integration is just plug and play in a way, while a custom integration is a project of a couple of weeks and a lot of problems and solving the data side of things, coding and so on, and cost. Custom integrations cost definitely more than a plugin. So it's kind of fully round up conversation that I don't think that some of these things in development will fully thought through before they went live.
Well, it takes us 4 parts of a series to have the whole conversation, because this is just an expansion of the flow of when we're talking to clients and want to get this done right, we have to take the time to walk through these different parts. And good on you if you can handle this in one conversation. But often there's different discovery calls for technical versus business strategy versus outcomes. And I love that answer, because we get to the point where you involve the systems you need to involve to get the job done, right? And if we are presented with a challenge that HubSpot and Spotify don't speak the same reporting language, and there's teams working in both systems, that's when you move to the class of tools designed for that, which is when we say business intelligence. That's what Power BI is. There's a big category of tools that solve for that problem, right? And now that this is why it's interesting to see when when do we get to that point? And it's at the end of the day, this is why retainers exist, in my opinion, because so much of this, to define the need for a whole separate tool, when you don't have an understanding of why the tools are speaking a different language, how important it is the users and where they work are, it's a very it's very challenging to go in and scope it from day one when there's a lack of knowledge, right? But it's cool, and not surprising. And it's helpful for me because I often don't know exactly why, the BI tool comes into play, other than they already have Microsoft and it's an easy add. But it's good to understand that specifically with the funnel metrics, which sounds like you're referring to, just the ability to take in all different types of data, and make sense of it without trying to force it. Because what we're doing there is we're not letting the platforms themselves, whether it's HubSpot or Shopify, decide how to measure our business.
Yeah, correct.
Right. And what are some surefire signs that people have allowed that, in your opinion?
Oof. Before I answer that question, I'll just say that my view of systems overall, the more customizable it is, the better it is. And a lot of people and businesses are going to hate this, what I just said, because, we always talk about simplification and sales processes being too complex and rival CRMs like Salesforce being, a legacy and a beast when it comes to customization. Yeah, but it's needed. Like, don't get me wrong, like HubSpot is not pushing so many product updates in the last 2 years that they don't understand that if they want to go large and enterprise, they need customization. Because these guys, larger and enterprise, they know the processes, they know what works, they know what led them to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 employees. They know, right? So they want that process to stay because don't want to change the process. They do smaller tweaks. They don't do process changes like an SME would do if, all of a sudden, I don't know, events as a revenue stream is not working. For example, that was for us. So we were just discussing it internally in our team meeting this morning. So there we go, one example. So we changed the whole process because we're an SME, right? 14 people employed. But large don't do that because it's a huge shift for them altogether. So customization is definitely needed. How is the customization implemented? That's a different problem. That's a problem of people and consultants and internally employed people in admins for that system. But that's how I see customization. And in a lot of cases, what we are seeing is that there's two, when a software does not meet process needs, there's two solutions. Either a customer abides to the software and changes their process, which is like such a red flag, such a massive red flag for me. If they're testing, different story. But if they know a process and then have to change it because of tech, that's a problem. That's a tech problem that needs to be resolved. And I think that's why potentially HubSpot is seeing quite a few migrations from other to other CRMs, because let's face it, they've shown such a massive growth in the last months and in the last year, especially, but there is also customers moving away from, and we had an example when they were moving from HubSpot to Salesforce because it just couldn't meet their customization needs, and that's just the reality. So that's one solution, kind of just change the process or move to another software. I would classify that as one. But the second one is you just give up and you say, okay, we can't do that. And we'll have to do it manually, or we'll have to export an Excel spreadsheet and do it and then re-import it. Oh my God, that's even worse. Like that creates so much manual work because, manual work always goes to my team and they have to go out there and do that, which is not a problem. Great. We charge for that. Awesome. But I'm here to do best practices. And I don't want my team to focus on data imports. I want them to focus on the complex stuff in order for us to resolve and prove value to that customer and not data import, and go and get somebody else, to do the data import or do it internally. But we do it in the end. So yeah, I mean, coming back to HubSpot I think it's getting there slowly. I think they need to do a better job in some of the releases, especially because, not all of them are fully thought through. And again, coming back, I think we mentioned this is in every single part of the series, is how many product updates are we really using in comparison to how many they're really pushing out. So that's a big question. Another thing is, and I think that I'm going to do a LinkedIn post about it, but I really do think that some of the Salesforce consultants, some of the bigger players that have been with Salesforce for 20 odd years, that they're looking at HubSpot product updates and they're saying, we had this for last 10 years, So I would also advise HubSpot maybe to be quiet about some of them and just kind of release them under the information of those news and product updates altogether. So yeah, it's nice and flashy. It's definitely sales material that HubSpot should be using, and I definitely encourage that. And we use it in our sales process of HubSpot when we're selling a new them as a software. But I don't think it's still there. I think they'll have to put a lot of work in there, but they're slowly getting there, which is a positive thing, I think, for all of us to see. And we can touch about some of the e-commerce related stuff like an order object that's still not showing in the navigation. We still can't control the navigation and all of that stuff. So that's an important one. So why isn't that already resolved? Customer, object naming convention changes. Great. What was that, 2-3 months ago altogether? Absolutely amazing. We jumped on that one and just changed it for a couple of customers that we've been waiting for for years on that side of things. But then again, I don't know, you change, coming back to education, because we've done it for mostly for education customers, is, company to school. And then you go build a report and it says company properties. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my overview of everything.
Right. No, I think that's why at the end of the day, like trying to bring this conversation out of the tools themselves. Because we do see a lot of, at least I've experienced a lot of influential Salesforce people starting to come over to the ecosystem. And like one thing I love doing is like, hey, let me tell you how that ecosystem works over here, because it's way different than the thing you're used to, right? And it's not going to make sense to you like at the beginning, but there's tons of opportunity, right? But what you're describing is like that the CFO, like a couple red flag or one red flag is when there's a go-to person for like all the reporting that matters to the business, and they're most likely using a spreadsheet, right? They haven't been able to get any system to like show it the way that they need it. And sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it's just they're comfortable with their like super awesome spreadsheet that they've used at every business they've been to. Like there's FP&A, roles specifically for this part. And like you start to go to the people who actually report on the data and understand how they do it and where they go, they'll give you some of the best feedback. Right. And they'll do it. And we got to do it in a way that, like, again, rises above the systems in place. Because if we're buried in a comparison conversation, right, we're not in a good place, because then we're allowing the systems to decide things that they shouldn't be, deciding. And on that note, I'd love to talk about AI a little bit. Because something we heard last week at the AI Summit is the speed, right? Not just from how much AI is developing, but also like the need for businesses to be able to move fast and be agile. And the place that I usually see that getting bogged down is decision-making processes. And we show up in this same meeting every week. We're like looking at the reports for the first time because everybody like hurried up to update the data. We made the same decision that we did last week, and then we don't act on it, right? And so much of that comes from not being able to translate across systems and in the system-wide strategy. One thing AI is starting to do is create this conversational layer, whether it's from the LLM side or like the rebuild of Breeze Copilot is starting to support this, to where I'm suggesting that admins are now enabled to be the role that I've asked them to be already, which is challenger coach, right? Like, if you want to see this data, we already built this report that you asked for before. I haven't seen you use it. Like, here's the link again, right? We send the URL like 10 times before they click into it. But now actually saying like, now click this button and ask the questions, that you have in this space, whether that's inside of HubSpot or in an LLM like the, OpenAI connector. Once we get to the LLM level, we know we can connect to other systems, and model context protocol for me helps to cut through a lot of the complexity that is the whole SaaS space, like not buildings in a standardized way, right? So that systems are so challenged to talk to them. I'd love to understand, can that be a silver bullet like I'm describing? How far are we away from that? Like, what are you seeing in terms of this kind of business intelligence aspect of understanding the data? Because obviously last week, or maybe the week before, everybody's like, oh, OpenAI connector. Like, now you can just go plug into your portal and just ask any question you want, and you will get good insights. That's not happening.
Yeah. Well, bear with me for a second when I tell you my theory. So
Yeah.
If we look at AI as an outcome, same as a report and a dashboard as an outcome, what does an outcome of a report and a dashboard depend on? The quality of data. Okay. And how does AI work? It works on data, period. That's just, in simplest layman terms, it works on data. So if the data is, and pardon my French here, crap, how are we going to get the best out of AI? And you're going to see, when was it, November 22 or December 22, when ChatGPT absolutely exploded. It went public and everybody started using it overnight and so on. A lot of companies invested a lot of money, especially large and enterprise, into AI projects, which all of a sudden, not all of them, but a big portion, started dropping those AI projects because they realized that their data is an absolute mess. And they first had to sort out that big data side of things. The funny thing why I'm also mentioning this is last week alone, we rarely get website inquiries for our services, mostly referrals and, hunting people. But we got 3 data cleanup requests last week. So that's a sign. We haven't been receiving that much, and then a week before we got like 2 and then 1 and all together. So I think that people are slowly starting to realize that if they want to use AI within the next year or 2, they first have to put good data governance rules in place. They have to put data management. They have to, look at data quality and so on. So my view on AI is it's absolutely amazing. And I've sent out the team email this morning. I want my team to use it even more because it's great for problem solving, because it's great for ideas when you had a long day and you can't just, after 50 messages with the customer and you're pissed off and you need to solve something, like, yeah, AI is great there. And I think it's great that, in comparison to what it was 2 years ago, that now it searches the web and gives you the most updated, sources and things like that. Amazing. Like, continue doing that, continue developing AI. But I'm very, very cautious. I'm very cautious because I know that, relating back onto HubSpot is we don't use AI Builder for reports. We're never going to use it 100% because it just doesn't do the job. Anything that we ask a little bit more complex than get me a number of unknown ownership of leads, or something of that, so it's not going to get it right. We have to do it on our own, so we stopped it. Same with workflows, like build me a workflow from AI. Impossible, absolutely impossible to get it right from the first go. So I don't know whether because I'm European, so Europe is always kind of a little bit more cautious than people are in the US, and I think in the US everything is AI. I think name me a team meeting that doesn't get mentioned AI and so on. I think it's great in some of the things, summarizing meetings and recording the meetings and setting tasks off the back of that recording and things. It's again coming back to problem solving and so on. But I don't think it's there yet. I don't think it's going to be there yet in 6 months or maybe even a year because the data is not ready.
Right.
And we have a lot of customers that for months and months we're just cleaning and refining the data, and constant clean and less properties and more drop downs and less single line texts and more conditional kind of options and conditional logic in properties. So we enforce that data, and then we employ a data enrichment tool to kind of put that data in place. And that data is also not good because it's outdated. And let's face it, all data enrichment tools claim that they have the newest and the best data. They don't. That's a reality. Maybe it's going to help you with your 50-60% of your work, but the rest you have to assume that it's correct rather than anything. So, and all of that impacts reports, all of that impacts dashboards, and all of that impacts AI in the end. So a little bit of a lengthy answer from me to your question, but I really don't think that we're there. And if you want to get some meaning, yes, maybe it's good for understanding. It's very easy to load a spreadsheet into ChatGPT and for them to, to summarize it, and the connector with HubSpot gets you some insights. But if the data is not right, sorry.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point. Context is everything. And that's why it matters for this conversation too. I mean, I'll be honest, reporting and dashboarding in HubSpot is not my strength because I always find the gap in the data. And then until we fix that, like, don't come to me wanting reports. Like, it's just, right? It makes no sense. And the same thing is with AI. And something I learned that was super interesting last week, because often when people see AI as the tool, right? It's like, oh, the tool sucks, right? And especially with Breeze Copilot, right? Where it always says, I don't know, I can't do that. And it just should be sitting there. And and you spend so much time figuring out what the prompt needs to be for it to see the thing, right? What we heard, and this is where the human element and understanding how all these tools work and come together and who's building them and why is why I go to all these events and why I try to watch these interviews. Because um, what Nicholas Holland said, who's the head of AI at HubSpot, is that they made an assumption early on that customers would not want any hallucination. Like that was the worst thing. That was the worst outcome of an interaction with Breeze Copilot would be a hallucination. So they built it that way. So no mistakes at any cost. So, and what we've seen when you tune it that way, it says, I don't know all the time. It's not going to make any mistakes. So it's not going to take any risks or any assumptions, right? And now they've been talking to customers and customers say, hey, we're okay with some level of hallucinating if all of this stuff can be done, which is basically the LLM experience. And that's where I think the learning curve of AI is understanding the nuances of what context it has, what it doesn't, what context do you have, and how to tell the difference. And because the first thing you're going to note, if let's say you plug in this OpenAI connector, if you understand how dirty your data is, it can help you understand how to clean it up, well, where the gaps are, what's true, what's false, and you start to get. That's why you moving into this conversational mode have been really powerful for some people, that I see. But understanding the nuance, and that's why we came back. In parts 1, 2, and 3, we're all to solve for this part, right? What is the strategy? What are you trying to accomplish with the systems? What does the data model look like? And how is it being integrated? Where does the data flow? How does it get there? All these things AI needs to know too, or it will, because these LLMs are built to hallucinate when needed to try and answer the query. So just take extra care. And even if it's comes across as brilliant insight, even when the data is perfect right now, you have to understand if it still might not be seeing it all, on the first pass. I mean, when I plugged mine in, I had just asked for an audit without any context, and it told me I had 300 contacts when I have 3,000, in the system, right? That doesn't mean there's no usefulness there, right? It just means it's not as easy as hey, give me an audit, and that's gonna come back perfect.
Yeah.
So if people are starting to, well, let me back up, because you mentioned the 3 data cleanup requests, which is probably the most common, maybe outside of lead management, lead generation. People saying, I want to do lead gen with HubSpot, help me. Usually, definitely from HubSpot customers, the most common request is, I need help cleaning up my data, right? And that's all they say, right? Do you have a quick path to getting to the bottom of what actually is required to do that?
I was doing an audit yesterday, so usually our process when we get a data cleanup inquiry, we ask them, let's sign an NDA, let us audit the data, and then we can come back to you. I'll tell you what I'm looking at in an audit, because audit is still done by myself, and we do the following: property duplicates. So come that you have 7 phone number fields and things like that. Then your special properties, we call special properties, email, phone number. First name, last name is a special one because it has to have a capitalized letters and things like that. So everything that has certain data governance rules on top of that. On companies, it's the domain, is it correct? Is it .con or .com, and so on, and things like that. So audit usually takes all of that in account. We also look at the object use. We look at workflows and what are they setting, what are they doing. We look at integrations, what is the data coming into HubSpot, and all of that sort of thing. So you have to look at a holistic view don't forget about forms and landing pages and all the areas, because all the functionality that is built there in HubSpot in one way or the other produce data. So you need to know what the data is, and you need to know what the sources are. You need to know how is it being formatted. You need to look at it. And for us, is we started with a new customer. Let's say, I don't know, they want us to build a dashboard, a simple dashboard. They just want one dashboard building. The first thing that we would do with the customer is look through all the properties, all of them, because we need to understand how are they, I don't know, how are they putting together marketing sourced leads? How are they notifying that? Is just date entered MQL, or is it something else? So do they have a custom property for that a workflow is setting based on certain criteria and so on? So a data cleanup project is always a beast in its own. Doesn't matter whether it's 300 records or it's 300,000 records, because understanding what the system really does and what are the requirements for it take time to build, to understand. And then when you clean all of that up, then what? If you don't put data governance rules, if you don't train the team on how to do it, if you don't put an SOP together on how to input the data, if you don't enforce it with the functionality of HubSpot and so on. So altogether, data cleanup is maybe the most common, but also what customers then don't realize is how much time involvement is going to be from their end. Because it doesn't matter, whether it's again 1,000 records or 10,000 records, we'll have to, with data governance rules, we can clean up the historic and the current data to an extent. There's always going to be 1 or 2% you'll have to come in manually. And typing in city or state or, I don't know, United States is not very nice, right? And that's where everybody can avoid it. So they think that they can really outsource it. But my data audit always has 15 questions. And they're like, what's going on here? What's going on there? What's going on there? And then on those 15 questions, you get an answer on 5, and 10 is like, I'll check with my team. And then 5 more come in and they're like, 5, we have no idea what's going on, but we are using, great. But to reinforce anybody listening, like it's possible. Like we have some customers that, for example, my team know exactly what's happening at a certain stage, and troubleshooting is just great. And I think it's a process. I would say, it takes us a year on a monthly constant working with the customer to get to a stage where we are just waiting for an inquiry and we already know how to do it and what's going on. And our customers, some of them are like very, very complex, because we have a customer that has 17 different integrations that are pumping in data into HubSpot. I think like 7 private and 10 native altogether. I mean, to understand that beast, and how do you map it out in a data model? Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Because I find that, like, especially in this integration conversation, almost any change that they know they need, they feel like they need to clean the data first, right? But often the change itself is what's going to clean the data in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So how do you help, like, just as you described those 15 questions, 5 or 10 of them they have to check with the team, and the other 5 they have no idea, right? So like there's a change management element. Can you give any advice on which data? Because what I'm trying to avoid is people think there's band-aids that can be applied and will just like help us remove the anxiety right now, and then I can focus on the like doing the system like the right way. What are there any kind of I guess quick wins or band-aids that you like to target if you have to? I want to say, because oftentimes if we can just get to the scoping process of what the system actually needs to look like as fast as possible, I try to push people there. And usually they're, especially if there's an integration. And if you can show that the integration, as long as it keeps working, is going to keep dirtying the data, it takes a minute. Like they still want, but there's got to be a way to clean up the data. Like, how do you kind of let them know nicely that it's like, really, it's not going to happen as fast as you want it, first of all, but this other approach is really the path that we need to take.
Yeah. say it straight to their face how it is. Very transparent and say, look, guys, this is the situation. You got yourself in a mess. This is going to take X amount of time and X amount of money. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? Some of them say, yeah, we got a better quote. Fine, no problem. Go to somebody else. See you in 6 months. Some of them come back and say, like, look, yeah, I found this freelancer, didn't do the job well, didn't put data governance rules in place. We are getting a mess. No problem. Then we kind of sort it out. But I think you have to be open about it, and you have to put it in front of them and say, like, look, here's evidence that your data is a mess. Like, look at the number of unknown owners that you have on contacts or in companies, and look how many first names are missing or how many emails are missing, meaning that the integration is pushing something in without an email, or people are importing lists without a proper thought behind it. So straight, with data, you have to be objective, and you just have to say, look, it's a mess. Here is the proof. What do you want to do about it?
Yeah. Gotta. I think, especially with most leaders, at least, users throughout the org, right? Most of the time, they're pretty smart and they understand what works and what doesn't. They've been often sold a bill of goods that HubSpot is going to do all these things or Shopify is going to do all these things, and I'm not going to have to think about it. It's not that they don't. It's not that they can't think about it, right? It's just that they thought they didn't have to, right? And they have these expectations that if you unravel them in the right way, it's very common sense decision making, like at that point. So hopefully, the whole goal of this series is to help talk through it out loud, give you some language to use, like decision points related to reports and dashboards, like deals versus orders, like specific language to help have more constructive, conversations aside from should it be HubSpot or Shopify or, XYZ system. And I think we did that. I'm going to give us a little bit of credit here, Stefan. I think this was a valuable series, and I appreciate you, taking the time to share your knowledge.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I fully agree. I think if we got somebody to think, I think we would call both of us would call that a win. So, yeah. Thank you very much again for inviting me. And look, I'm always open to talk about data integrations and all of that stuff. So, yeah, give me a shot next time you're doing something like this.
Yeah, I probably will. That's why I would like all of a sudden this new phrase, let's build integrations, came up. I think there's more to be had here. We know integrations, I think it's the number one like challenge of anybody asking for HubSpot support nowadays, which makes sense. So we're all about putting more enablement content out there, and continuing the journey. So until we figure out what that next series is, thanks so much, Stefan. Everybody have a great week.